You don't need expensive gear, you don't need natural talent, and there's no reason to worry about the arms race that is social media guitar playing. All of these things are ultimately destructive and do nothing to benefit you. So if you are a new guitar player or someone who has self-doubt, I want to speak to you directly and let you know that there is a way out of this and you can learn and become a musician no matter what skill level, and you can improve in ways you never thought you could. But before we get there, I want to talk about the mindset part first. So instead of calling it natural talent, I'm going to refer to it more as a natural inclination towards something. So if you are creatively minded, there is a higher chance, baseline, that you are more interested in learning things like music, art, and photography. So if you are that kind of person, then it's going to be initially easier for you to pick up, learn, and stay attentive during practice. Even if you are not what you would consider a creatively minded or inclined person, that doesn't mean that creativity cannot be learned. Much like a muscle is used and grows, creativity is the same thing. There are many ways you can practice and implement learning creativity into your routine that will ultimately make you a much better player. So don't feel like you need to be a creative to learn, because that couldn't be further from the truth. Another thing that people don't seem to understand is that there is so much more work behind the scenes, and what everyone always sees is the finished product of someone. So if you think about a guitar player that's been playing since they were a kid, maybe 5 years old, and they've been playing for 30, 40 years, of course they're going to be extremely well developed on the instrument, most likely, right? But there's also a lot of environment early on in their life that helps them nurture that and accelerate their learning. So oftentimes with these musicians, they are put in an environment where they can always succeed, or most likely succeed. So their parents may be musicians and they may be listening to all different kinds of music. So they're in a way getting ear training. They have their peers are playing music. And if you have a support system like that, you have such a greater chance of staying with it and then also learning at an accelerated rate. Even if you don't have that support system, you need to be open with yourself and be more understanding and patient. I think far too often people may think they are patient, and I'm certainly the same way even today. You may think you are, but in reality it may even take a little bit longer than what you think. So whenever you feel like you're not learning anything and things just aren't sticking mentally, and it just feels like your fingers are going all over the place, they're not communicating with your brain, you will get over that. It'll take time. It may take a couple days, couple weeks, a month or two, but if you give up, you'll never know. That's just the reality. You will never know how far you can take it. I want to give you a more generalized timeline of what to expect as you invest more time in learning guitar. So if you were anything like me, I started from zero. I had no prior knowledge. I've never played an instrument before, no music theory knowledge. So everything I did took me far longer. So that's the problem. If you have nothing to base it, you have no prior experiences, everything is going to feel awkward. You won't know how to hold a pick. It's going to feel weird just doing that. You won't know any of the notes on the fretboard. Even just holding the guitar against your body might feel strange. There's just a lot to overcome. So what I would recommend in this stage is it's less about the amount of time practiced and more about the intention and goal and breaking things into smaller chunks. So if you just want to learn one chord for the day. Maybe it's like an E minor, because that just is, your 2 fingers here. Just do that. And there is a substantial difference between what I would call active mindful practice and more passive practice. So you're going to learn a lot faster if you are more attentive and present-minded in what you are doing. So if you're just trying to learn that E minor chord and you want to pay attention to everything, right? So I would pay attention to, are my fingers blocking any strings? So you might pluck each string individually to see that they're all ringing out. And then on top of that, you could pay attention to tension. Tension is one of the worst things you can have while learning, because it will develop into further potentially damaging injuries to your hand. So you want to pay attention to, can I apply less force while I'm playing this? Things like that. And I would only focus on that for a little bit. If you only got 10-15 minutes, or you're getting frustrated, or your fingers hurt too much, which is going to happen a lot early on, don't feel guilty about stepping back and coming back later when you feel like you have more patience with yourself, right? So after that first phase of being at 0 or close to it, you'll start hitting a second phase, which is like the first breakthrough, right? So during this time, you're going to feel like your things are starting to click and you're learning a lot more, and you can actually apply them to your instrument. So at this stage, you may be learning a handful of different chords, and you can cleanly switch between a couple, which is great. You may start learning some lead lines or some guitar riffs, things like that. And you might start even learning the notes on the fretboard. And once this happens, there's going to become a period where you feel like you are plateauing. And this will happen no matter how long you've been playing. Even for me, I've felt like I've been plateauing lately, but I know I'm slowly working towards a breakthrough. So this always comes back to, you need to be more understanding of yourself, patient, and understand that this is going to be a long journey, but one of the most rewarding things you could ever do. The final one I would call is basically, you are almost guaranteed to be a musician for life. So you've overcome all these different obstacles. You've understood that sometimes you just won't feel great about your playing, or it feels like you're not learning. And despite all that, you've become so invested and you just love the instrument that you are inspired to pick it up and play at almost any time. I cannot emphasize this enough too. If you're feeling down about your guitar playing and there's just some technique that isn't clicking with you, and no matter how much you practice, it feels like you aren't getting anywhere. Another thing I want to address is, you may not be good at every technique on guitar, but your weaknesses define the voice you have on the instrument. So in my case, I'm not really a sweep picker. My legato's pretty bad, but I have pretty good picking and a sense of groove. So I always try to play more to my strengths than trying to hide my weaknesses, right? That doesn't mean that I'm not trying to get better at those things. It just means that I have developed a way of amplifying my strengths rather than trying to worry so much about the other things. And I think that's what you need to take from this, is that the likelihood of you being incredibly good at everything is probably very low. And there's nothing wrong with that, because ultimately it makes you more unique on the instrument. And I would rather you take away from this that even if you can't do X, Y, Z, you can still make beautiful music and you can inspire other people, and there's a way to figure it out. I know everything up to this point has been about the mindset part of things, and I've only briefly touched upon natural talent itself, but I want you to think of 2 different scenarios. So you have what's considered the natural talent person and the more disciplined and consistent person. So you could have a talented person that, because they had a far easier barrier of entry, feel less compelled to practice more deliberately and consistently. So maybe they only practice 1 or 2 times a week and it's for a couple hours, and then they do nothing after that. And then you have another person who maybe practices a little bit less every day, but it's for most of the week. And at the same time, they're writing down short and long-term goals. That is going to be a more successful way of doing things than just sporadically having no plans and hoping that your initial barrier to entry will get you to coast through the rest of your musical journey. And this also doesn't really take into account that there are so many more facets to being a guitar player than just the technical side of things. And I'm not going to knock on anyone that achieves highly in those things, but there's so much more, right? So can this person fit what needs to be done in the song? And do they get along with other people? Are they open to new ideas? I mean, there's so many other things that you could be worrying about. And like I said, it's not a competition. You can take this as far or as slow and small scale as you want. But no matter what you end up doing, I want you to understand that it's just going to take patience and a little bit of understanding on your end, and that things can be achieved doing this. So just take everything out of your brain about just not being good enough or not having the capacity to be able to learn an instrument. It's just a process like anything else. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate it. I'm not used to doing long form videos like this. I know there's going to be a little bit of editing, but eventually there will be less and less as time goes on. And if you like this and you want to hear more of my thoughts and more lessons proper as time goes on, consider subscribing and liking the video if you got anything out of it. And let me know what you think, because this has been on my mind for a long time. So until then, keep working hard, and as always, find your voice on the instrument.